Hey folks, it is Kanesha Venning here. Most of you know me by Casey, and I'm excited to share with you my contribution to the Spring 2023 Ministry and Context class, our Capstone project. And so for me, I try to make connections everywhere I go. So you're probably wondering, why is she doing this outside? I'm technically on my front porch, and for me, that is important. I am born and raised in the South, and I love all that it entails. And part of that is being able to build community on the front porch. But also, part of who I am is of Gullah Geechee descent. And the porch allowed for us, right, to be able to have some level of protection from the outside world. The Low Country in Mount Pleasant, Charleston, the Sea Islands would paint the roofs of their porches. I hate blue because the story that is told is that bad spirits can't pass over water. And so I began to think about this thing as it relates to water. And those who know me know that I've been doing this work in Atlanta with a special group of young men who were formerly known as the Water Boys. And they were criminalized and villainized simply for selling the very thing that provides us with our physical life sustenance. But not only that, spiritually speaking, water protects us, it cleanses us. And again, when I think about what water is there for, both as we consume it and as we immerse ourselves in it, how and why would being black and being male and being poor be the very reason that now the thing that we all need is the thing that people use against us? And I hope there are questions that you still need answered as well as we think about this idea of it being deeper than water. And then how do we get to that answer so that it can begin to hydrate our own souls so that we can shift the narrative and the perspective of what it is that we think when we think of black, male, and poor, and what is our responsibility as faith leaders to shifting that narrative. So I hope you enjoy. Faith community should get involved in the lives or advocate for people that society is throwing away or...
Oh, yeah. Well, we should advocate for those in need, because if we didn't, who would? Kanesha's been a leader since I've known her, right? And so she has come from somebody who led programs for other people, now leading her own program. And, the technical side of what she's doing, but she has a servant's heart, and she believes that she believes in the least and the less and the loss, and she believes in second chances, and she always is she's gonna be there for you. And so I think that comes from her faith. It comes from her upbringing a lot, but her upbringing was heavily influenced by her parents' faith. So you can see it shining through her.
I've been in community for almost 20 years. What I realize is that I've been the most comfortable and the most confident, really outside what we call the four walls. And in that, it has helped me understand that the folks that we are serving the most rarely ever step foot inside of a church or inside of a faith-based building. But we have to find ways to be relevant and easily accessible to those that we seek to support the most. And for me specifically, I am focused on impacting and effectively serving the lives of black male teens here on the west side of Atlanta. And so you may be wondering, what's the title about, right? It's deeper than water, hydration for our souls. As you look around the room, there are a couple of little subtle elements of what is important to me, and that is being of Gullah Geechee descent. And so you see the water bottle here. We have a sweetgrass basket in the back, a palmetto rose on the table. And there's a phrase that we use, and it says, eat deeper than food. And the goal is to understand that don't look to us just because we make great recipes, right? But just the idea that the food that a lot of us consume here in the South is a direct result of Gullah Geechee people bringing those things as West Africans to the coastal region. And so as I thought about that, I also thought about the work that we've been doing, and that this conversation that we've been having specifically around Black male youth is more than just the water, right? And we know that has kind of been the catalyst and the topic of conversation the last 3 years. But what we've learned is that it's deeper than the water. It's deeper than those sales.
What you do with the money y'all get?
I just think it up.
Yeah, you saving it?
Save.
What you saving it for?
You might get older.
Okay, we need. You might come across something.
Go
Well, I don't know. You saving for a car, for school?
A car.
Just,
I want
just
that.
to
I
save,
just
make sure.
I want one stop shop with the water. One stop shop with the water. One stop shop with the water. Yeah, we got the water. $4 one stop shop. Yeah, $4 one stop shop. One stop shop. One stop shop.
Well, water is essential to our sustainability. Water also carries memories. It says, regardless of circumstances surrounding baptisms, the waters of Christian baptism for African adults and recently transported African children perhaps evoked memories of the symbolic use of water dominant in the African worldview. In many African societies, large bodies of water, rain, and waterfalls are evidence of God's continual creation and therefore sacred places where God meets humanity. As we get ready to move into this next segment, I want you to listen, because really what Aaron begins to set up is this idea of gang culture and how gang culture has run rampant in our communities. But then again, the question is, where are our faith leaders when it comes to this particular work? And how is it that we've cast these young men to the side when there is a level of responsibility that we have?
The data does not support that it's 1 million Black and brown kids who are killing themselves. But when you look on the news, you will be captivated by the idea that Black and brown kids are killing each other at an alarming rate. But what we should be very clear about is telling the real story. Because when we say, oh man, there's so many y'all young people killing each other, it dehumanizes Black and brown kids. And when you dehumanize Black and brown kids, it's easier to mistreat them. It's easier for us not to listen to somebody who's not human. As someone who works in violence intervention, I do suffer from trauma, right? Secondhand trauma. So it's harder for me not to see the children getting killed because I'm around them. But I also know that that is just a minute subset of real data.
And I think the other important part around gangs is that they take care of each other. I have been known over the last 3 years to say a very particular phrase, and it's being poor is expensive. So doing good is going to cost. People find themselves in situations because they're still trying to meet basic needs. So from a sociologist's perspective, it is the need to meet Maslow's hierarchy of needs that contributes to the willingness to engage in what has been deemed criminal behaviors. It's not that people who earn incomes below the poverty line are naturally prone to activities in which they are later criminalized for. In fact, they are nurtured into it. But is there some nurturing? And is there some nurturing of that comes from how we treat people? How we treat these young men in particular?
When I turn 18 this year, I want to try to get into in real estate so I can start my real estate license. Staying out the street, because I feel like if I never met Miss Casey, and Miss Casey really ain't just come in and try to help her and talk to her, I feel like I'd be either in jail right now. But like with Miss Casey, she'll talk to her, she'll come, have her come over here to the Hay House just for us to have somewhere we could be from in like a different environment from like we be out there. And okay, crazy out there though. But Kanesha really helped me with that, staying out the street.
You know, when I was doing my research for this particular project, there was not a lot of faith-based materials to pull from. Where are our churches and faith leaders in this conversation? And what does God have to say about how the poor is treated in these instances? But in this next clip that you're going to see, I attempt to break down a particular scripture that talks about, you know, the poor will always be with us. And is that really what the scripture says? Have we misinterpreted it? And have we allowed that to be an excuse to not be accountable? We hear this context because a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, young folks who find themselves in gangs come from very economically depressed communities, like they're seeking something, back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And so, at least in the Christian faith, there's this phrase that we hear a lot, that the poor will be with us always. Psalm 34:6 says, a poor man called and the Lord heard him. He saved him out of all of his troubles. But he gave us instructions that as believers we're to do greater works than he did. And we often pray that we are to be the hands and feet of Christ here on the earth, right? We're supposed to meet the needs. But for that to be a truthful statement, it means that those of us who hear of those who are impoverished, that we then have to show up in some capacity. Psalm 82:3 tells us that we are to defend the weak and the fatherless, uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. And what we know is that we have to sometimes stand in the gap to help defend them when others want to blame them and not acknowledge their circumstances or offer support and help them experience a different outcome. Now, I mentioned the scripture of the poor will be with you always, or the poor will always have you is actually what the scripture reads. Matthew 26:11. Now, there's a difference between the poor will always be with you and the poor will always have you. The remainder of the sentence says, but you will not always have me. And the essence of this is that there will always be poor people in the land. Therefore, I command you to be open-handed toward your fellow man who are poor and needy in your land, right? And folks are quick to talk about, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and, you know, utilize your resources and your skills. And we're in Atlanta. So I'll insert a Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. quote here. It is cruel to tell a man to pull himself up by his bootstraps when he has no boots.
I'll take the resource part of that question first. I think, you know, we just have to, people who have those resources, access to those resources, right? We just have to do a better job of taking those resources to the people, right? I think we got to do a better job of meeting people where they are. Like, everybody can't make it to the meeting, right? Everybody can't get online, right? Everybody can't, you know, everybody, there's so many things that happen over the course of the day, particularly for those in most need, that get in the way, right? It ain't because I don't want, or it's because I can't get there, right? And so we've got to do a better job of bringing our good intention to the street level.
And a lot of times the thing that helps me do the work that I do is I remember one thing, is that as I do my best to live my life in faith, I have yet to see anywhere in the Bible where Jesus prayed first. He met the need first. It is recorded that he asked his disciples, why are you praying when there is food to give to them? I don't need to pray about certain things if I have access to the resources to provide to these young folks. Finally, I think it's important that you hear from these young men. He essentially is speaking as a representative for his peers. And so I think that it's important to know that what he wants is possible if we do our part.
I'll be known for
never stopping. Like I was always at it, moving. Like really, nothing really stopped me. Like I ain't really let nothing stop me.